As chairman of this emergency committee meeting, I'm declaring that it's necessary to have the meeting virtually because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is being recorded. First off, is our agenda is to discuss the status of the library's situation. Do we have anything more than what you've already mailed to us?
No, I think that we can probably just go systematically through these questions. I can even put them on the screen if that's helpful. If you want me to do that, okay. Let me see if I can see what I'm looking at. Here they are. All right, can you see those?
Yes.
Okay. We are currently in phase 5. So these are questions that apply to what we want to be doing right now. If we want to make any changes to what we're doing. And I can also share with you what other libraries are doing. Let me close my window because it's kind of loud out there. Such a beautiful day. I've had my window open all day. Okay, so the first question is, what level of mask compliance will be required of patrons in the building? Right now it's required for all patrons. We could leave it as required for all patrons. We could require it only for unvaccinated people and children under 12 using the honor system. Require it only for unvaccinated people and children under 12 unless they show proof of vaccination, which would be complicated for our staff to have to demand that from people, I believe, or just required for no one and just make it completely voluntary. I can show you also what other libraries, or I can look that up for you real quick, what other libraries are doing. It was in the sheet that
Seems to be up for the map on that.
Yeah, there was a map with the study. Let me see if I can find that and get that to come up for me. Here it is. Okay. I'm gonna stop and share this instead. Okay, so there were 93 responses, and about patrons wearing masks, and 48% said that no one is required to wear masks in their library. And then 28% said that everyone is required to wear masks in their library. Everybody else was somewhere in between. So that can play into what you want to do, and we'll go ahead and take a look at staff measures as they're listed here as well. That's the other really relevant thing on here. 28% of libraries said that staff are required to wear masks in patron accessible spaces. 25.8% are not requiring masks for any staff. And then let's see. Actually, these two are pretty similar. All staff members while in any shared space, or all staff members while any patron accessible space. And then unvaccinated staff don't have to wear masks is also about a quarter. So there's not a whole lot of agreement on that. Except that I'd say it comes to about 50% are having their staff wear masks, either always or, or at least when they're around other people to one extent or another, particularly the public. So about half are still having staff wear their masks. So we're looking right now at the patron measures. Let me go ahead and stop this and put our questions back up. Okay. So our questions for us is with patrons, what level of mask compliance do we want? Required for all patrons, required only for unvaccinated people and children under 12 using the honor system, or one of the others? How do you guys feel about that?
Well, speaking for myself, I'd like to hear from staff members in view of the fact that I've seen people in public sessions on the media and whatever having problems with uncooperative people, and then they become the brunt of these people's frustrations. I'd like to know what the staff thinks about this.
Mm-hmm. Lynette, what are your thoughts? Are you here?
We kind of, well, with the exception of the guy last week, you remember the guy last week,
Mm-hmm.
He got a hold of himself,
Mm-hmm.
because like, as soon as the governor said that, we're at phase 5, things are opening up, et cetera, but the particular business has the right to decide what they're going to do in their business. If the sign on our door says masks are required, then put the mask on. Now, he apologized for the way he carried on, but, and it didn't really amount to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But there are always these people that are telling us, well, everything's open and it's stupid and it's this and that. It's unfully vaccinated. Well, so are we, but we're still requiring masks. Because you still have some variants that we keep hearing about. And there are cases that are still going up. And if everybody's out and about, the counties that don't have great vaccination numbers are coming to visit. So now I'm like, again, because of my immune compromised mom, whether I'm fully vaxxed or not, I'm gonna wear a mask. So I'm just saying, for me personally, nobody, the staff really seem to be that uptight about wearing a mask.
Let's keep it to the patrons first, because I think that's a different issue for staff. The concern I have is twofold. Children cannot be vaccinated, but they're under the care and control of their parents.
Yeah, and that's another
one issue. A second issue is that if you require masks, that means that you have a policing responsibility for that. And I seriously don't think is going to be a very rewarding experience for the staff. But I want to hear your feedback on it.
Yeah, I've seen a couple people go through like the front area, because we kind of have a smaller entryway now with signs up. But a few people have, I wanted to hear Lynette's thoughts, because she's right there, like having to talk to people often. There's only been a few that have made their way all the way down by my desk by the time, not wearing a mask. And then when I've had to ask them to put on a mask, they've been very surprised. And a couple people have left. I think because they weren't mad. Nobody yelled at me or anything. They were just like, well, then I'm leaving, and that's been my experience. I haven't had a lot of people getting really angry about it. A lot of people, I think, are continuing to wear masks. But I think so much of it is just like, what is the norms? And the norms are changing constantly as we're going. And I feel like vaccinated people are wearing masks less and less. So I don't know, because I do see people like employees wearing masks in stores, but I don't see as many of the customers. So yeah, it's just a really hard decision to have to make about it.
I agree.
Especially with the kids.
Yeah, but like my son, you know, I have an 8-year-old. So what I'm doing is limiting where I'm taking him. And that's just what we have to do in this situation, because there's not going to be safe spaces for kids right now in public. I mean, like, we can't make the world safer than it is, because it's just, they're not able to get vaccinated. But luckily, I just looked on the Jackson County Health, you know, there was 0 cases again today. So there's only 7 active cases in Jackson County, which is very low. So, you know, the vaccines are working, even if, you know, the level of vaccinations aren't as high as we want them to be. But I'm just like, if my son goes somewhere, kids are good about wearing masks. Like, he just puts it on. He doesn't care if nobody else is doing it. And we stay away from other people as much as we can. And we're in and out places. And we're just going to be doing that until he can get vaccinated.
Yeah, on the one hand, we need to be a safe space for kids, but on the other hand, yeah, I'm not seeing almost anyone wearing masks in public other than staff in different stores. But as far as customers, almost not at all. So I do think people are getting more and more surprised. In the course of all of this, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 times someone has exploded on us, and that only that one person apologized, in my experience. But yeah, it is hard, because when you're walking around, you do see people with the mask hanging down under their nose and stuff. And if they're not right directly across from somebody, it is hard to, you know, police that and say, hey, you need to pull that out, because they're not really breathing on anybody directly. So I don't know, it's kind of a tough call. And we do have a couple of staff members, Lynette being one of them, who have family members who are vulnerable. And I did ask our other staff member, you know, if we get to a point where we're not requiring masks, is it going to affect whether or not you're willing to work here? And they said, no, they'll still wear a mask, but they expect that will probably happen at some point. They were relieved it hadn't happened yet, though. Lynette, with your mom being you know, immune compromised, are you, like, how would you feel if we went to you know, just saying that if you are unvaccinated or a child under 12, then you need to be wearing a mask in here, but not trying to police it and letting other people walk around without a mask, other than just on patrons night right now, not yet talking about staff. What are your feelings?
Well, I'll be masked up regardless.
Right.
So I'm kind of like, you know, do whatever you want to do, because, you know, we can only tell you what it says on the door. Because again, if it's part of the patron conduct policy for right now, then all I would ask you to do is to adhere to the patron conduct policy. Because if it's, like I said, if it's on the door, or whatever it is, I'm like, forget that business about it being posted on a kiosk. We know nobody reads that. But, you know, the big one on the door, you know, could you just do what we ask?
Right. Well, and people do, but it's just a matter of whether or not we as a group think we ought to change it or keep it as is. What is the priority? Is it, you know, to make this a safe space, particularly for children, until children can be vaccinated, or to make it, you know, kind of the norm for what people are used to, and not have people walk away because they have to wear a mask?
It seems to me that the governor has made this decision and we're just swimming upstream trying to do something different from
Mhm.
just that, making
Yeah.
it a recommendation to people to mask if they have any reason to be masked, including children. But I think the governor has washed his hands of the state's involvement in this and left it to, if if you're vaccinated, you're not at risk. If you aren't vaccinated, you're running your own risk in the thing. I think that's what the governor said to us. Whether he did it by a good or bad decision, I think that's what we're living with.
Mhm. Well, if we were to, all things considered, and, normally on a committee like this, you would have 3 board members present, but we only have 2, but that is a quorum. But if we were to also consider the votes of the 3 staff members here, and we were to each vote to do either A or B with patrons, either A required for all patrons or B required only for unvaccinated people and children under 12 using the honor system, what would your vote be, A or B? Each person here. Jen?
I think I would say B at this point. I'm just kind of tired of
Mhm.
the policing, but
Lynette, what do you think?
I would just say A because that's what we're dealing with right now. Just everybody wear one, just because.
Mhm. I'm torn. Barbara, what do you think?
Well, I'm torn too, because of course, we would love to get to the point where we don't need masks at all. But B, the option B, maybe I'm cynical, but I don't trust.
I was thinking the same thing. Our patrons are not honorable.
I mean,
Right.
I can't, I would doubt that all the people who are unvaccinated would use the honor system. Now, the children, that's another matter, because we can tell the child is 8 years old and should be wearing a mask. So I'm really torn by this and was hoping that you 3 library staff would have, because you're the people we're really interested in hearing about what's going on and what you think would be the most efficient and make your job palatable, that any of those. D, the governor is really, as Don said, we could do, have no mask necessary. But I went out this morning and I went to pick up some bagels and masked. It's just so hard for me to believe that that's such an inconvenience, but apparently it is. So I really am very mixed on my feelings about this.
Yeah, me too. Don, do you have an opinion?
Well, I want to say that I am quite sympathetic to Lynette's position. And for that reason, I can certainly be convinced to a different point of view, but I think we're facing this decision because of what is happening in the community. And I just think you're just buying yourself frustrations as a staff to try and police this, I think, at this stage of the game. So I would be a supporter of B.
Okay. Since we don't have Susan here to break a tie and I'm torn as well, what if I were to do this? What if I were to poll the staff and get their anonymous opinions and go with the staff majority on it?
I'd be fine with that. I just think that even if we go with A, you're going to be talking about this in 2 weeks.
Yes, probably so. Yeah.
But our patrons have always been annoying. So it's kind of like a mask is just an annoyance. just an extra annoyance, trying to push them out the door when it's time to close.
Right.
But they can't have more internet time. And, it's just one more thing in the patron conduct policy they want to ignore because they're more special than everybody else. So like,
Well,
I
some
agree with that,
people,
but I would say you've probably seen these people erupt
Oh,
on airplanes
yeah,
and having fights over this,
yeah,
which is why I think this is unfortunately a bigger deal to people than you and I might think. I wear a mask when I go into a store today, even though I've been vaccinated for 3 months or 2.5 months anyway. So I fully understand
mhm.
your position and I agree with it, but I don't think that's the community's view of it.
mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I'll poll the staff on it and see what they think, because it really is, I think it's a combination of frustration and safety. And while some patrons can be frustrating like that, the majority of patrons are not.
Yeah, the
But
vast majority are very, they come in and masked up all as well.
right, and lovely people. So, but I also don't want people to be walking away. Like Jen said, she saw some people walk away rather than wear a mask. I saw somebody almost not come in because he said, "Oh, it's hot. I don't want to put one on." And I convinced him to come in and put on a paper one. But I just happened to be outside at the moment. Otherwise, he would have just walked away. So I'll poll the staff if that's if that is okay with everyone here.
Sure.
That'll work.
Okay. Now, what level of mask compliance will be required of patrons at outdoor programs? We don't have a lot, but we do have a couple, and they are children's programs. Will we require masks for everyone? Require them only if they're unvaccinated or under 12, or required for required with proof? I really don't like the idea of requiring proof because I think that the level of interaction and policing there is too much to ask of our staff. But do we want to require it for everyone, or just as a, on your honor, if you are unvaccinated or you're a child, then please wear a mask?
I think the general guidance at this point is that kids don't need to wear masks at outdoor schools or programs, because I know at my son's school they're being very safe, and for the last few weeks they've not had to wear a mask outside at school, and it is also very hot.
Yeah.
So I almost worry about, like, normally I say, like, oh, breathing problems, like that's really not a good excuse. But when it's 90 degrees outside, I would actually worry about that a little bit. So I don't know about requiring it.
Required for no one.
I would say required for no one, and people that are, feel more comfortable, like nobody should be mask shamed.
Right. I tend to agree with you on that too.
Jennifer on that. I think Jennifer's got it right.
Yes, I do too.
Okay. All right, that works for me. What level of mask compliance will be required of staff inside the building? Masks required for all staff throughout the building, masks required only for unvaccinated staff throughout the building, or masks will be required for unvaccinated staff throughout the building, but only required for those of us who are vaccinated in patron accessible spaces. And I will say that to the best of my knowledge, we have only one staff member who is not vaccinated.
Well, I don't think we can require or have staff not wearing masks if the patrons are wearing masks.
Right.
That's the opposite of what most
true.
people are doing.
That's true.
So if we decide to have patrons wear masks, I think everyone should wear masks, and we can still wear masks even after that if it makes people more comfortable. But maybe that would be a good, like, polling question as well. Like, if we don't require masks, what about staff,
I can pull the staff on that and go with that.
I think I would go with whatever the majority of the staff feels comfortable with.
Mhm.
I certainly agree with Lynette that it makes sense to wear a mask, and I would encourage people to wear a mask, whether they're staff or patrons, but I don't think we should be requiring the staff to do that if we're not, unless there's a general support for it.
Mhm. Okay, I can pull the staff on that one too. Then what level of mask compliance would be required for staff at outdoor programs? I would tend
If
to,
you're running a program for children, just as I'd expect a teacher to be masked with around children, I'd expect staff to be.
mhm.
Go along with that.
Okay. So if we're requiring them indoors, we'll require them outdoors, it sounds like.
You know, model the behavior.
Right. Okay, capacity. Most libraries are not imposing any time limit at all. For us, it has been useful to have people sign in terms of really that's kind of about mask use and just kind of getting their attention as they come in the door. And we've had them sign in order to be able to have them comply with the 2-hour maximum. So if they're signed in, then we can say, hey, you signed in 5 hours ago and you're still in here. So, but it really we've not come anywhere near capacity. So it seems like that 2-hour time limit might not really be necessary anymore. I mean, schools, we are kind of well into summer, and I haven't seen us get anywhere close to, being too busy in here for COVID. So should we get rid of the 2-hour limit?
I would be in favor of that.
Yeah, we got a couple of people that stay past it, but not by a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually it's usually the same people, the same
Yeah.
offenders.
Yeah. If we just get rid of that, it might be easier for us.
More a management problem than anything else, it seems to me. I think it makes sense to get rid of it.
Okay. How many people will be allowed to gather in the meeting room? If you have a board meeting, you're going to have 11 people around a table. You might have people who come, so, you could end up with about 15. But we do have some groups that would like to start to meet again, if possible. And they're not super large groups, but just kind of wondering what kind of capacity to say. I don't see us cramming 35 to 40 people in there to watch a movie together at this moment, the way that we used to, because they're all right next to each other. But maybe, a group around a table, or, it's spaced out around and chairs. The capacity in that room is 44. Half of that would be 22. What do we think? And Jen, you're the one who really has these, the groups, and what size do you think we would need to allow in order to accommodate some of those groups?
I think 15. Usually they're 15 and under at this point. We're not really planning anything right now to go in there, but we are kind of at risk of losing some of these groups, which they're nice to have. They're just like the creative writing groups and stuff. So 20 might be maximum, I would say. But yeah, and a lot of those groups are fully vaccinated too. So I know they're looking for places to go.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, any other opinions on that, or do we just stick with 20? 20,
That sounds like a
That's a reasonable amount.
reasonable number.
okay. Are we gonna allow any food or beverages in the meeting room or at programs? I tend to think not.
Yeah, I would prefer not. I mean, maybe we could base that on the mask policy. Like if we're not going to require masks, you know, it's easier to drink a beverage, obviously, but I don't know that we should be providing them at this point. Maybe if someone like brings in their own cup, or I don't know.
Mhm.
What do you all think?
I think kind of no, not provided, but individual drinks are okay. Like it's the food sharing that I think is a problem.
Well, is the concern that you think that we're going to be spreading the virus? Is that what you're talking about?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, like there's no salad bars out at anywhere, you know, there are buffets, but I mean, if that's your whole business, I guess you have to provide a buffet.
Well, I just came back from Italian Village last weekend. They have a salad bar there.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Well, and I guess we could have individually packaged things too. That's what I started doing, you know. But
Mhm.
honestly, this whole pandemic has made me realize how much I don't miss having food at things. Like, do we even need to provide it all the time anyway? You know, maybe it's not a necessary component.
Think of the money you're saving.
Yeah, you're saving money. You can use it
Yeah.
on some other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think for the time being, it's fine not to have food or beverages, but
Mhm.
I think in the long run, those are kind of things that help people enjoy meetings.
Right.
That's true.
Feed them and they will come.
That's true. It is. That is kind of like long-term library lore, is that if you provide food, you'll have better attendance.
Mhm.
So,
Work for the board.
yes. Okay, well, here's a big question. What will our library do at this point if one of our staff are diagnosed with COVID-19? So, and we need guidance for the employee and then for the agency itself. And you know, the CDC is basically that if you are vaccinated, you do not need to quarantine, even if you have been exposed to someone who has COVID. So in the past, if we had a person on staff who was diagnosed with COVID, we would have to shut down because we had all been exposed to that person. But at this point, with almost everyone vaccinated, we probably wouldn't really need to shut down. It's far less likely now, of course, also that anyone would be diagnosed with COVID, but if someone was, we'll need to know what is it that we're supposed to do in that moment. So we do need to know for the affected employee. I assume that they should stay home, and you know that's the same. They should stay home until released by the health department. But for the unvaccinated staff who may have been exposed to that affected person, I would think that they would have to stay home if they're unvaccinated. And then for the library as a whole, though, with all of the remaining staff who are vaccinated, I assume we stay open. Does that make sense?
Does to me.
Yeah, could we just follow like if somebody were diagnosed, could we just talk to the health department and do what they recommend?
They're going to tell us to stay open. They told us we could stay open when it happened to us during the like midst of COVID.
Right.
So they're not going to tell us that we need to close.
Mhm.
They told us it was totally up to us. Like they appreciated that we were extra vigilant and closed because our staff may have been exposed to their coworker, but they said we were not required to close at that time. So they're definitely not going to change that. So now what do we do if a staff member has been directly exposed to someone diagnosed with COVID? Again, my feeling is it kind of only matters if they're unvaccinated. Then they need
This
to
creates
quarantine.
kind of an interesting dilemma. You're kind of encouraging the one staff member who has not been vaccinated to continue to be not vaccinated because that person can be off work and you have no way of knowing whether they've been exposed to it or not. So it's kind of the whole effort of the society is to make us, the vast majority of the public, vaccinated so that we're not spreading this.
Mhm.
I certainly think if somebody is exposed to it, they shouldn't be in the building, but that's a different thing than, I don't know. I don't understand what we would, if I were unvaccinated and I'd been exposed to it, the thing I did was I got tested.
Mhm.
And when I got negative, then I went back to work. That's what I did.
Yeah, but so the CDC is saying that if you have been exposed, but you are vaccinated, that you are not required to quarantine.
I know because
Um,
I'm not contagious.
yeah. So it really only applies to the person who is unvaccinated.
Can we
And
require people to be vaccinated?
no, probably not. So
I think that depends upon their medical condition.
Mm.
well, and if you had someone who was vaccinated, but the vaccine didn't take because of their, you know, there are some medications that make it so that the vaccine does not cause you to build up any antibodies, that person would be equally vulnerable as well. I don't have anyone that I'm aware of who's in that situation directly on staff. But I just feel like with the CDC saying that people who are vaccinated do not need to quarantine, that, and it depends too, because the next question is, what if that person is in their household? Because I feel like that's a different level of, if the person who you're living with has COVID, whether you've been vaccinated or not, you might catch it and not know it because of the level of exposure that you have. And maybe you should be quarantining if it's a person in your household versus like, hey, I went out to dinner with my brother-in-law and then I found out he had COVID, but I was only exposed to him for 2 hours and I'm vaccinated. So that's where I guess I just need to know what to tell the employee. I know that the health department is going to say that in either case, you can let that employee come to work. So, because that's what the CDC says, but just for the sake of being, vigilant and changing what we've done in the past before everybody was vaccinated, I just need to know whether, to tell someone to stay home if they've been exposed. And if I'm telling them to stay home because they've been exposed, and then if I end up with somebody on staff, then I'm going to have to close. And I don't think anybody is doing that anymore.
Right.
So,
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's suppose a staff member who's been vaccinated reports to you that someone in their household has come down with COVID, been tested positive. You were kind of suggesting, I think, Diana, that as a matter of good policy and public health and whatever, that we should encourage that person not come to work. If that's so, is that paid time off? Is that sick time? Is that unpaid time?
It could either be sick time if they have sick time or COVID time. That's what our policies are. I have not during this time though had anybody take advantage of this situation.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have a staff that is anything but to be trusted. That's not,
Mhm.
I want to be clear about that. I think we have great staff. But I think the policy should be determinative as to if we're telling people we don't want them in the workplace, we have to have a policy as to whether or not that's paid time off.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, because that it is, they would either be able to use their COVID time, or if they have sick time, they could use their sick time. COVID time is at 2/3 pay. So we do have the policy for that. And before anyone was vaccinated, we would definitely have told them that they have to stay home. And so until they can test negative, and there's a timing issue with that, because you're not gonna, if you were exposed yesterday, you need to wait until it's been 5 to 7 days. So you're gonna have some time off no matter what. So if we continue with that, even with people who are vaccinated, it's kind of over the top in terms of what the CDC would recommend, because they're saying you don't need to do that. But so that's kind of where I'm at is, you know, what do we do if they're directly exposed? And then what if it's someone in their household that they're directly exposed to? And I'm kind of more concerned about it being someone in their household than it being just a chance exposure. I was, you know, at an event and heard somebody who was there had COVID.
Right.
So,
Barbara, what do you think about this?
Well, I think I think we could delineate between those and those who have someone directly in their household with whom they are associating regularly,
mhm.
then they should be staying at home. But those who've just had a chance meeting with someone who's
Mhm.
tested positive, no.
Well, I think I'm
And this
sympathetic
is for
to that.
unvaccinated? I'm sorry.
This is
Dan.
for vaccinated employees.
Oh,
Right.
vaccinated
Vaccinated.
employees.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
If an unvaccinated employee would still have to do all of the quarantining that they
Mhm.
normally would do. So this is for vaccinated employees.
Yes.
could you just like encourage them to stay home, but not force them to stay home? Like with, if they're not having a positive test, I mean, they're 95% chances, even, you know, that they're not going to get COVID. So staying home for a week is kind of a lot.
It is.
I mean, and
I don't know that I would encourage them to stay home.
right. Well, I know, like for me, if someone in my household had COVID, it would likely be my son, and I would need to take care of him. So I would be taking COVID time anyway, because the rest
Right.
of my household is vaccinated. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like yes, in your household, I mean, I guess I could leave that as encouraged but not required in your household. But I don't want to require anyone who just had a chance encounter who's already
Yeah.
vaccinated. I mean, that just seems like overkill.
yeah, it kind of seems like at this point, unless you have like a positive test, you probably don't really need to stay home.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, unless you're unvaccinated and you've been directly exposed, but then they, you know, the in your household are having a conversation unmasked for more than 15 minutes with a person who has COVID. That's how DCFS would ask about it. Like, so that was their definition of direct exposure, was having like a conversation with someone unmasked and within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes.
Of course, all that was being said though back before we had the vaccination
Right.
Right.
issues. I think that there's sort of a consensus with your suggestion, Diana, that
Mhm.
for vaccinated staff, they'd be, if they would choose to be home to caring for someone and whatever, they could use COVID time.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I don't think it should be required of them.
Mhm. Okay. So not required if vaccinated, and then if unvaccinated, just follow the rules that we followed before.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Should vaccinated staff continue to do a temperature and wellness check at the start of their shift? I'm kind of not seeing the purpose of it anymore. We've still been doing it, but
I would be happy to stop that. It's hard to remember. And, you know,
Right.
I don't feel like if I'm feeling the slightest bit sick, because we're all so hyper aware of
Right.
our symptoms right now. It's like you get a runny nose and you're like, oh no. So
right.
we're not walking around with fevers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
That's true.
halfway through my work day. You know, when I come in the morning and open, I'm halfway through the stuff, and it's almost 9 o'clock sometimes before I remember. If I don't do it right away, particularly if there's nobody here to witness,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I said, it's 9 o'clock and we're opening the doors, and then I'm suddenly realizing, oh, I needed to take a temperature check. It's like, well,
Right.
you're fine, so you know, let's get at it.
Yeah, that's true.
So you know, if we don't do that, I'm cool.
Yeah, I'm fine with ending that for everyone who is vaccinated and continuing it for the vaccinated staff. And then, or for the unvaccinated staff. So just two more questions here. When should the plexiglass around the circulation desk be removed? I think on the one hand, you know, it does make you safer from unvaccinated people because they're not breathing directly on you, but it is also hard to hear around it. So I don't know. I mean, I'd be fine with leaving it up until children are vaccinated, but I'm very curious, Lynette, about what your thoughts are about whether it is a help or hindrance.
I've been able to keep my pens on my desk. Easy to grab, and I can actually keep up with my stuff. But if the slot could be a little bit bigger, you know, just a little bit bigger. But for the most part, you know, I'm all right with leaving it up till the kids are, you know, till you actually have kids that are vaccinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked
think
about
that makes
removing the
sense.
shower curtains around our desk. That's a little bit different, but I don't think until at least after summer reading, just because we have a lot of stuff back there now. So it's just kind of hard. It does hinder that like approachability, and it's hard for us to see out of it kind of, so you can't tell as much what's going on. So I will be ready and happy to get rid of it, but I think maybe a little longer.
Okay.
Yeah, put up with it a little bit. Or like I said, if the slots where, you know, you got a little bit more space where you can actually hear without having to bend over.
Right.
To hear it, and they could get the material in easier.
Right. Yeah.
That's
So
true.
that was a little bit bigger. I could put up with it a little bit longer.
Okay. Well, and I can ask him if he can make the slot bigger. I don't know if he can without the risk of breaking the plexiglass. Yeah. Like, so we'll have to see. Yeah.
Hey, he built a whole kitchen. He ought to be able to cut a couple of pieces.
Hey, he built that whole thing. So
they are the nicest barriers I've seen around anywhere. Yeah. So we were very lucky.
Yeah, definitely. So
people were very impressed. They're like, what is that?
Yes, definitely.
Does he have a card?
I know.
Okay, are there any additional procedures that should be considered? The only thing I can think of is just we're gonna have to stop quarantining. No, like 89% of the libraries are not quarantining anymore, and we're gonna have to get the meeting room back. So I, with the approval of this committee, would be fine with just stopping that as of tomorrow.
I
Yes,
think that's the right decision,
I
particularly
do.
since it's airborne transmissions. I think they
Mhm.
pretty much consensus of CDC is that that's not an issue.
Right, okay. So Lynette, we can stop as of tomorrow. But that'll give us a week to get everything done. Like if we were to check in the books, we're supposed to check in today, and then the books were supposed to check in tomorrow, et cetera, then once
Basically
we're,
clear the room
yeah,
of
but it can,
everything that's in here.
yeah, but it can be cleared slowly. It doesn't all have to be cleared in one day. It can be cleared over the course of that week.
So we got 4 days worth of work in here, so.
Right. And that can be done over the course of those days. It doesn't need to have, we don't need to immediately check everything in, but that will slowly empty that room so that it'll be available in July for meetings and so forth. So is there anything else? Any other pressing questions that you're wondering about that you think we should discuss?
No, I'm
we-
gonna-
Say this, if the consensus of the staff is that they would like everyone to continue being masked,
Mhm.
I think we should discuss this in 14 days, or at least by the next board meeting.
Mhm. Oh, that's true. We could bring it up at the next board meeting after polling the staff and see. Yeah, I'll bring both of those questions about mask compliance to the board after I've polled the staff on their opinions. And then as far as, I mean, we can get rid of the 2-hour time limit, but I think until we decide that we're going to have mask compliance be voluntary based on, your on the honor system, based on your status of being vaccinated or not, it seems like it's helpful to make people sign in, just because it does make them like it keeps them from just running through like unmasked. We can catch them more easily and say, hey, you need to put a mask on, and which most people do without any problem. So until we get away from that, but I feel like if we get away from that, having people have to wear a mask one way or another, then so I feel like signing in is not just contingent on the 2-hour limit. We can get rid of the 2-hour limit, but still have people sign in just so that we can check in with them, for those, until we just say, okay, you don't have to wear a mask unless you are unvaccinated, then you do that on your honor. It helps with it seems like when we do have to have these conversations about mask compliance, it's much easier if they've not gotten all the way into the building. If they've gotten all the way into the building and we have to chase them down, it's a harder conversation and they're more likely to get angry. So if that makes sense to everybody, we'll keep that until we have a decision about mask use. And we might know more by the time we have our July board meeting also, about, how if this is still going okay, regionally, if it still seems like we're doing well as a region with keeping COVID down. And if and we may have also, our experience may change over the next few weeks also. So, so for now, we'll go with this. Are there any additional questions? Anything? Right. It's 4:54. I'll go ahead and stop this recording if we're ready to adjourn.
If there's any objection, the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.